I wanted to mainly talk to you about your perspectives and experience as during your time as Minister of Health. You came in on the wave of the People's Revolution in the Philippines, enormous political goodwill both in the country and globally. And yet you had a major challenge. You had to transform a health system to serve the majority of the people who had high expectations. That things were going to get better quickly. So tell me about the president calls you, Alfredo, I would like you to be my Minister of Health. What happens?
Yes, well, I said, can you give me a little time to think about it? He said, sure. Come back to me tomorrow and give you an answer. And then I went to see my father, who had served in all three branches of government, legislative, executive, and retired as Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. So he knew government. And I told him about the invitation. He was already 89 then. He looked at me and said just two words. He said, service and patience. Just two words as words of advice. And they served me well throughout. Second thing I remember is that in the second cabinet meeting, the Minister of Finance, who was a personal friend, said the Treasury is bankrupt. Marcos had stolen everything. And so all of the ministers were instructed to tighten their belt because there was no money available. When I went back to the ministry office, all of the leaders of the bureaucracy said, that cannot happen. This is about health. This is about life, and so on and so forth. And I said, we're not going to win that debate because all of the other ministers are going to say the same thing. But it's true, they said. Well, it won't wash. So what I did was I used something I learned from the Jesuits. I went to school under the Jesuits. That when you're in crisis, you do two things. You use your brains and you fall on your knees. And I did that over the weekend, and then on Monday I went to see the Minister of Finance. And I gave him a proposition. I said, just don't touch the Ministry of Health budget.
Leave it as it is.
Yes, but the reason is not so much health but political. So he said, explain yourself. Bengzon, you're telling me about political. Yeah, I said, very simple. You know, we are living from day to day. Just last month, I was invited to Southern Philippines by a very important personality who had supported the new president in the elections, who said the people are restless because they said it's been 1 month since President Cory became president and our lives are the same.
Nothing's changed.
So I said, are you guys crazy? And he said, you can't reason out to the people. Now, all of my staff in the ministry advised me against going because they said, you have nothing to give. But I couldn't say no to this fellow, so I said to him, I'll go on two conditions. First is, I have nothing to give except myself listening. And second, I want to listen not just to health people, I want to listen to teachers and farmers and the military, even to people who served in the dictatorship. And he said, we have a deal. I went there, spent 3 days, and it would guide me in how to run the ministry. The impact of those two conditions were this. First, the people there said, he wants to listen to us. All the years of dictatorship, nobody listened to us. We must be important. Secondly, he's the top dog in health, but he wants to listen to everybody. In fact, he listened to the health people last. This must be a new way of thinking about health. So when I got back, that's what I told the ministry. And then go back to my conversation with the finance minister. I told him that we are living from day to day. If you recall, there were coups after coups. Because people are restless. And I said, I think people just want a reason to believe that the government knows what it's doing. The only thing we can dispense is hope. So my proposition is this. There are in southern Philippines buildings made of 4 walls and a roof. Because during Marcos' time, he gave lots of money to his political warlords. Right. And they were going to build hospitals, but that's all what money. I said, allow me to convert those buildings into infirmaries. I don't need doctors, midwives will do, and then I need a few supplies. And the whole undertaking is that we can tell the people, before Cory, there was nothing. Now in Cory's time, there's something. And when you have a health need, that's an emergency.
When you're starting from zero, something is better than nothing.
Yeah. And it made such a big thing.
Most of your ministry must have been holdovers from the previous regime.
Absolutely.
So one of the issues that I hear ministers complain about often is the resistance, if not obstructionism, by the ministry. Even if the minister is not from a different political party or there hasn't been a radical political change, there seems to be this tradition where the ministry has a tense relationship. There's a tension between the minister and the ministry and the bureaucrats in the ministry. How did you manage that?
Well, that was an interesting experience. But the first thing I became aware of was that we were like a revolutionary government. So I leveraged that. And there were
Did
two.
You fire people?
Well, that's the story. There were 2 key people there. The person in charge of HR, personnel, and the person in charge of finance. Unfortunately, important as they were also the 2 most corrupt.
I can imagine.
The person in charge of HR was an intelligence agent. And the person in charge of finance had such a sleazy life. So I had 2 young assistants whom I took in without any promise of position or title. And I said, we're going to have to get rid of these 2 guys in 2 weeks' time. Because if we don't, we're sending the wrong message. So what I want you to do is to sit down with them and milk everything in their brain so that we can let them go in 2 weeks. Because
did they know that they were going to be let go?
Yes.
They knew it.
Okay. And after 2 weeks, we fired them. And it sent a message to the entire ministry. Because this is what I said in the first meeting I had with the key people. I used theater metaphor. I said, we are not only going to have a new cast, we're going to have a new script. They didn't understand what that meant, right. So I had to explain. Right. And then I followed it up by saying that, but until you hear from me, you stay in place and be prepared to answer 3 questions, which I will tell you what those questions are. The first question is, what does your unit do? What is its mission? The second is, tell me about yourself and your crew. And the third question is, tell me how the office of the minister can be of help. I fired the 2 key people. I kept everybody else.
Wow.
I inherited 11 regional directors. I promoted 1. I retained 3, but reshuffled them. And I fired 7. That was after 1 quarter of intensive investigation, where I talked to everybody they dealt with, so I knew who was the most corrupt.
Who was corrupt, right?
Yeah. And then I went around the whole ministry, nationally, and made the following pronouncement. In my book, the regional director is the Minister of Health in the region. Because I cannot run a ministry of 62,000 people from headquarters. Right. So I said, you need to make the same expectation of the regional director as your expectation of the Minister of Health. And the impact was incredible. That, in effect, empowered. It not only empowered the regional directors, but it also set the standard of how they would conduct themselves.
Made them accountable.
Yeah.
Right. And then you had to come up with a plan
That's right.
You had a largely dysfunctional
Exactly.
health system, so it
Yeah.
was not serving the majority of people. Did you have a plan in your pocket?
Well, I had certain ideas that had been in my mind even during the time of the dictatorship.
What had informed those ideas? Where did you got your ideas from?
Well, I was a health professional, but I was also very concerned about equity issues and justice issues. As a matter of fact, I should tell you that there were 3 occasions where I was invited by the minions of Mr. Marcos to become Minister of Health. Very seductive invitation. But I said it just won't work because when you get to that position, everything is a loyalty decision. Anyway, what I did then was I instituted a widespread consultation with many sectors in society, different ministries in government. Like, for example, how did we form the national drug policy? We invited chambers of commerce. We invited people from the Ministry of Trade. We invited people from industry. We invited academics. We invited NGOs. It was a very widespread consultation. We were the only ministry that did that. And that was the first step in the formulation of what eventually became the national drug policy. And as we did that for that particular issue, so did we do it for what then became the National Health Plan. Now that was complemented by consultations at the regional level. 2 weeks out of every month, I was out of headquarters, and I would spend from Wednesday evening up to Saturday afternoon assembling the health machinery, in which the first was consultation. The second was some pronouncement about how I understood the responsibilities of the Ministry of Health. Very simple. Health is a fundamental human right. Our job is to make sure that that right is a reality rather than an illusion. And then we do workshops and so on and so forth. And the last day was great bonding exercises. Oh, very, very emotional exercises. But from that exercise, we went from region to region. By the time we got to the 3rd region, they coined 3 slogans. They said, newness, oneness, toughness. Newness, meaning we are a new ministry.
Right.
We are second to none.
We're together.
And we're together.
Yeah. That's very nice. You then had to take on what is probably the most, so many ministers have real difficulty getting their priorities actually implemented. They have the vision, but moving that forward is a whole nother challenge.
The first answer to that question, Michael, was a request I made of President Aquino. The day after she gave the invitation, I went to see her and I said, Mrs. President, I'll be honored to serve in your cabinet. I just have one small request. And she said, what's that? Of course, I can't do this job alone. I need a team. And she said, of course, you can't do the job alone. What's the big deal? I need to form my own team. Because the tradition in the Philippines is that the minister is appointed, but then the deputy ministers and so forth, they all come from different politicians making their own recommendations. I said, I need a team composed of people whom I know, whom I work with, and whom I trust. And she said, done. And I was the only minister that made that request.
Wow, that seems interesting.
I brought only 2 guys, 2 34-year-old guys. No previous experience in government. But we had worked together, so we were kindred spirits. And therefore, when I came in, this was a leadership circle of 3 people. And then we did intensive interviews of the people in the bureaucracy. And from that, we got expanded circle of leadership. There's in fact a very nice, very enthralling story that some weeks after that, in one of our sessions with the president said, before we start talking about the agenda, I think her way of coping with stresses was storytelling. So she said, there's a rumor going around town that my Minister of Health has a mental problem. And I said,
that may be the case.
no, I said, where's that coming from? Because they're saying that there's always a psychiatrist in your company. And so my answer was, yes and no, Mrs. President. And she explain yourself. Yes, he's a psychiatrist. His name is Dr. Antonio Perlas. He's trained in psychiatry at Johns Hopkins University. Yeah. And no, you know why it should be? Because I'm trying to look for people in the bureaucracy whom I can take a chance on. And who better than an expert in human behavior can be my advisor? Right. So I said, does that make me crazy? It makes me very smart.
And she accepted that?
She accepted that. In fact, the psychiatrist very quickly became advisor to the president on how to cope with crises. Yes. Yes. So that has led to my deeply held belief up to now that the most important asset is people.
If you were to give a single piece of advice to the ministers that we've just spent time with, most of whom are less than 2 years in their job, what is that one thing that you would tell them to have in their heads?
Well, I think I articulated this during the forum. Look inward. Ask yourself, what does this, I use the term gift, what does this gift of being minister saying to me about me? And your answer to that question is going to tell you what priorities you should do. Because everything begins with how you understand your mission. And your mission is about how you understand your responsibilities to the people. And then you will see there where you need help. I think the matter of problems that are technical, money, technology, you can get people to help you on those. But those are not necessarily the kind of people that are required for your team tied in. These two young 34-year-olds, we spent our working hours were like the forum. Yes. We'd get in at 7, and we'd go home at 7, in the evening. Yeah. But we did for the first quarter, we spent 80 to 90% of our time talking to people. Yes. And at 6 o'clock every day, we'd get together over cheese and beer, and we'd ask ourselves, what did we learn today? And then we would do the rest of the papers thing and technical things thereafter. And very quickly, we were able to form a circle. And I think one of the other most important things, it's a skill that I learned, is that you have to learn how to take a chance on people. In the first day that I was in office, after I met with the key people, I was brought all sorts of papers to sign, including checks. And you sign checks from 50,000 to 50 million, which I refused to do because I didn't know.
Where's the money?
Yeah, but very quickly, the papers went like this in 2 hours. So these other two guys and I stared at ourselves and we said, this is not tenable. And we figured that one quick way to learn the ropes is to look at the paper trail. By that time, we had milked the brains of those two guys that we fired. So we had the sense. And I think the disposition, it's more than a skill, the disposition to to be willing to take a chance on people is a key management and leadership requirement. Otherwise, you're not going to get anywhere. Now, you're going to make some mistakes. You're going to get burned. But I think that's part of what you bring with you to the table. Because and if you are unwilling to do that, you certainly are not going to be a leader. You will not even be a good manager.
Never push that boundary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Bengzon, it's an honor and a pleasure as always.
Mike,
Thank you.
my pleasure.
Thank you.